In 1942, deep beneath the streets of New York City, a secret experiment took place that was so unusual, so quietly buried, that even decades later, only fragments of the truth have surfaced. What started as a wartime necessity turned into one of the strangest forgotten chapters in American history, one involving hidden tunnels, stolen identities, and a mystery that was never officially solved. The winter of 1942 was unforgiving in New York. Snow layered the streets, dimming the city's usual energy under a quiet tension brought on by World War II. While most citizens worried about rationing and news from overseas, a small group of individuals moved through the city unnoticed, their work hidden beneath layers of secrecy. At the center of it all was a man named Thomas Hale. Officially, Hale was a civil engineer employed by the city. Unofficially, he was part of a classified wartime initiative tasked with something far more unusual than building bridges or repairing roads. Hale had been recruited months earlier under circumstances he barely understood. He was told only that his skills were essential to national security. Each night, Hale would leave his apartment in Brooklyn and travel to a restricted section of Manhattan near an entrance that appeared to be an abandoned subway station. Guards stood watch, their uniforms unmarked, their expressions cold and unreadable. Hale would show his credentials, descend the narrow staircase, and disappear into a world few knew existed. The tunnels below were not part of the standard subway system. They were older, some dating back to early unfinished transit projects, others hastily expanded during the war. But what made them remarkable wasn't their age, it was their purpose. Hale's team was working on what they called Project Echo. At first, Hale believed it was a communications project. The United States military was desperate for secure ways to transmit information across long distances without interception. But as weeks passed, Hale began to notice inconsistencies. The equipment they were installing didn't resemble standard communication devices. There were large metallic chambers, intricate wiring systems, and strange instruments that emitted low, almost inaudible vibrations. One evening, unable to contain his curiosity, Hale approached his supervisor, a stern man named Dr. Leonard Briggs. "What exactly are we building here?" Hale asked. Briggs paused, studying him carefully. "You're building something that could change the outcome of the war," he said. "That's all you need to know." But it wasn't enough. As the project progressed, Hale observed increasingly strange developments. Workers were divided into isolated teams, each responsible for a specific part of the system, with little understanding of the whole. Communication between teams was discouraged, questions were deflected, and then there were the test subjects. They arrived quietly, usually late at night. Some were soldiers, others appeared to be civilians. They were escorted into the deeper chambers and rarely seen again. Official records labeled them as volunteers, but Hale noticed the unease in their faces, the hesitation in their steps. One night, Hale stayed later than usual, pretending to finish calculations while most of the team had already left. When the guard's attention drifted, he slipped into a restricted corridor he had never been allowed to enter. The air grew colder as he walked deeper underground. The hum of machinery intensified, vibrating through the walls. Eventually, he reached a large chamber unlike anything he had seen before. At its center stood a massive circular structure, like a ring made of steel, towering nearly 20 feet high. Surrounding it were control panels, cables, and instruments that flickered with faint light. Inside the ring, the air seemed to shimmer. Hale stepped closer, his heart pounding. Suddenly, a voice echoed behind him. "You shouldn't be here." He turned to see Dr. Briggs standing in the doorway, his expression no longer stern, but something closer to alarm. "What is this?" Hale demanded. Briggs hesitated. For a moment, it seemed he might call the guards, but instead he sighed. "It's a resonance gateway," Briggs said quietly. Hale frowned. "A what?" Briggs gestured toward the ring. "We've discovered that under certain conditions, specific frequencies can disrupt spatial boundaries. In simple terms, we can open a doorway, not just across distance, but across something else entirely." Hale stared at him. "You're saying this is teleportation?" Briggs shook his head. "Not exactly. It's not about moving through space. It's about aligning with another point, another layer." The words made little sense, but the implication was clear. This was no ordinary wartime project. "And the people?" Hale asked. "The ones you're bringing in?" Briggs looked away. "We need to test stability." Hale felt a chill run through him. "You mean you're sending them through that thing?" Before Briggs could respond, an alarm suddenly blared. Red lights flooded the chamber. "They're starting a test," Briggs said urgently. "You need to leave." But Hale didn't move. Through a glass observation window, he saw a man being led into the center of the ring. The man looked terrified, his hands trembling. Technicians rushed around the room adjusting controls, shouting instructions. The hum grew louder, deeper, until it felt like the ground itself was shaking. Then, with a blinding flash, the ring activated. For a split second, Hale thought he saw something impossible. Shapes, shadows, movement within the ring that didn't belong to this world. And then the man was gone. Silence followed. The lights flickered. The hum faded. "Did it work?" someone shouted. No one answered. Moments later, another alarm sounded, different this time, more urgent. "He's not registering," a technician yelled. "Where is he?" another demanded. No response came. Hale turned to Briggs. "What happened to him?" Briggs didn't answer. From that moment on, Hale's perspective changed. What had once felt like important work now felt dangerous, reckless. He began to document everything he saw, secretly writing notes he hid in his apartment. Over the next weeks, more tests were conducted. Sometimes the subjects returned, but not as they had been. One man came back disoriented, unable to speak, his eyes wide with permanent fear. Another returned with strange burns across his body, despite no heat being present during the test. A third never fully regained consciousness, and some never came back at all. Then, one night, everything went wrong. Hale was in the main chamber when the largest test yet was initiated. Multiple subjects were placed inside the ring. The machinery operated at full capacity, pushing beyond previous limits. The hum became unbearable. Then suddenly, the ring destabilized. Instead of a controlled flash, it erupted into chaotic light. The air twisted, pulling objects toward it. Papers, tools, even parts of the machinery began to lift. "Shut it down!" Briggs shouted, but it was too late. A violent surge burst from the ring, throwing everyone to the ground. The lights went out. The hum stopped. Darkness. When emergency lighting flickered back on, the chamber was in ruins. The ring was destroyed, and the subjects, along with several technicians, were gone. Not dead, not injured, gone. In the aftermath, Project Echo was immediately shut down. Military officials sealed the tunnels, removed equipment, and erased records. Workers were reassigned, sworn to secrecy under threat of imprisonment. Hale was no exception. He returned to his normal life, but nothing felt normal anymore. The memories haunted him, the faces of those who entered the ring, the unexplained disappearances, the sense that something had been opened and never fully closed. Years later, Hale attempted to share his story. He wrote letters, compiled notes, even tried to contact journalists. But no one believed him. His claims were dismissed as fiction or worse, delusion. Eventually, he stopped trying. When Hale died in 1978, most of his belongings were discarded, but a small box of documents survived, discovered decades later by a relative who had no idea what they contained. The notes detailed everything: Project Echo, the underground tunnels, the experiments. To this day, historians debate their authenticity. No official records confirm the project. No surviving blueprints or government files have been found, but there are whispers. Urban explorers claim to have found sealed entrances beneath Manhattan that don't appear on any map. Former military personnel have hinted at unusual wartime experiments never disclosed to the public, and occasionally stories surface, strange, unexplainable accounts of people who seem to appear out of nowhere, with no history, no records, and no explanation. Whether Project Echo was real or not remains uncertain, but if it was, then somewhere, perhaps not in our world, the missing subjects might still exist, waiting in a place that was never meant to be reached. And the question remains, what did they find on the other side?